First up, A Bride's Story, Volume 7, which, again, deviates from what you might consider the main storyline that would focus on Amir and her husband, and instead focuses on yet another unique character. This time, her name is Anis, or Anis, however it's pronounced, and Serene, or Serene. And this is mostly focused around in and around the one particular part of a village town, which is the bathhouse, particularly the women's bathhouse. Anis is from a sort of from a kind of, I guess, upper middle class kind of upbringing, and she's, I guess, never been to a women's bathhouse, and so she goes there and is kind of, I guess, meeting new people, and she decides she sees one particular woman and she'd like to kind of, I guess, get to know her better and try and be friends. And then she finds out about this unique kind of bonding that women can go into, which is known as the avowed sister, which means that two married women who have children will go into a sort of ritual where they then are like the absolute closest that two women can ever become between each other, and they're just completely, it's like a sacred sisterhood sort of thing. And of course the whole volume is about the growing relationship between Anis and Serene, and it's a really nice volume. The only thing that is worth mentioning is that there is a lot of topless women, a lot of nudity in here. I would say like tasteful, because again they're in a bathhouse, so it's not entirely like it's not. You could, it's gonna vary based on person to person whether or not you think it's tasteful or if it's just exploitation, like it's there because but it's definitely something that is gonna make your judgment on that particular piece, which again there's even a really nice fold out full color illustration that folds out of the back. But again, I can't show you the front because it's all the women in the bathhouse who are, of course, not wearing any clothes. It was interesting. It was definitely a different art style for Kaoru Mori. Kaoru Mori, because she usually does like very strong, thick lines, and here she did very light strokes, kind of signifying that sort of hazy feel when you enter into a bathhouse and there's kind of all that mist around. It's really nice, but again, it's a lot of nudity. Then next up, Claymore 27, which this is actually the last volume in the series, and I would say it was definitely a great volume. Great finale for the series. You definitely get a lot of things are wrapped up. Unfortunately, a few minor things aren't quite as wrapped up as particular the very specifics about kind of the organization that actually created the Yomas, and especially the special metal that the Claymores themselves are made out of that make them indestructible. I would have, I guess, liked more info about that particularly, but again, it's not that important, and again, I think the series was kind of building to this kind of ending anyway. The final showdown between Claire and Priscilla, and it's every bit as good as you would think. They pull out all the stops, and overall, it's a satisfying conclusion to otherwise decent manga series. Again, I'm not putting this in any kind of super high ranking. It does suffer a little in a lot of characters, and a lot of times some of the art style is very minimal, and and especially with a lot of action and a lot of fight scenes like there are in this series, that a more detailed and a more well-defined art style would have really put it over the top. But for what it is, and especially how fairly unconventional it is for a manga series to not only have a nearly all-female cast, also no fan service. None of the women portrayed here you ever get the feeling that they're just there for eye candy. They all have fairly defined personas. Again, bearing in mind that some of them are a little more one-dimensional than others, but again, what are you gonna do? And also, like, it never felt like there were any weird gimmicky shonen type techniques or stuff. Like, it never felt like they kind of threw in some kind of weird power or something from out of nowhere just to spice things up. Like I could give the example of if you ever read or watched The Law of Ueki, how in the beginning Ueki's powers stem from his ability to turn trash into trees and all the different ways he can fight with that. And then there's a particular point in the series where it then becomes about Ueki gaining and using his celestial weapons. And they all but basically throw out the whole turning trash into trees power outright entirely. Or another example, how in Dragon Ball Z, Goku was using the Kaioken, and he goes through all this training to learn the Kaioken, and then he learns Super Saiyan, and then Kaioken is completely thrown out the window. It's not even... It's never even brought up again about how that worked or anything. It's kind of like one of those kind of dealios. But in here, it feels like everything kind of builds and coalesces together in a neat way. But again, I really like it. Next up, Bleach 65, which this... Again, it's hard to really say what's been happening in the Bleach volumes, really, other than, again, more fighting with the Quincy's, and this particular volume actually has a lot of the other cast members showing up, specifically Ishigo, Orihime, Chad, all of them show up, even get a reintroduction of some of the ex-Espada members who showed up in the last arc fighting. They were kind of the first batch of them that they fought, and I mean it's okay. It's been better than it has been. It's hard for me to really say when it's kind of just and One Piece volume 76. It really is kind of astounding how many volumes of One Piece there are. That's not a knock against it, but geez, I read this, and again, it's the big... They're still kind of penetrating and getting into the stronghold where they can find Doflamingo or Doflamingo, and they're just... you're just cutting back into different characters and what they're doing, and it really feels kind of hard to follow at times. And even still, like, some characters, I don't even know where they are or what they're doing. Like Chopper and Brook. Where are Chopper and Brook in this mess of a final throwdown fight? I don't know. I remember they were there initially in kind of the beginning, but like, where are they now with them in this final breakdown, and they're getting in here, and I don't know what happened. Are they still on the boat, or what? It's you see what I mean? Like, I think that One Piece is just... It's at that point where it's just got so much with so many characters, And honestly, as much as I like him, I think maybe part of it is just the stuff with Trafalgar Law. I think that he's just kind of one too many for the One Piece cast. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like if they're doing what I think they're going to do and have what's his name, Helempo, um join the join the cast proper, because I just don't even know how it's going to handle that many different characters all at once in it. I think that's who it is. Luffy's Sabo. That's what I meant. Sabo. I don't know how it's gonna work if they actually introduce Sabo back as another member of Luffy's crew. I mean, Luffy's crew is already at nine people. 10. You need 10 crew members on Luffy's ship. I mean, yeah, that kind of, I guess, rounds out a full pirate ship. But I mean, my God, that's a lot of people. You don't even give Nico, Robin, and Nami good enough character development as it is. In the last few arcs, Nico and Nami have basically done zilcho as far as character or their own kind of things. And, you know, I know it sounds like I'm really harping on a lot of stuff with it, but I mean, there's still some really great stuff going on here, especially this and next volume where they're gonna do Trafalgar Law's backstory. And again, that's kind of one of the biggest highlights for me when I'm reading One Piece, is to really kind of check out those neat backstories, because they're almost like little stories unto themselves. Like, you can literally pick up, if you could just kind of like cut them out of the main volume and just kind of staple them together and read those as themselves. They're almost like their own neat little kind of parable stories, and they just do so much to really add a level of world building to the world of One Piece, and just kind of a neat new perspective and things. You get to see how things kind of were, and then how that contrasts to the way things are now in One Piece. But that's all I have for that one. Deadman Wonderland, Volume 11, which again features more with Ganta and Shiro as their or Shino as their still Ganta's still getting into the core of Deadman Wonderland again after they all got out 2 volumes ago. They have to go back in now because of the fear of them restarting Wretched Egg, which could cause all kind of cataclysmic disasters. And again, we get some neat backstory with Ganta and Shino, especially Shino and her tragic backstory as her being kind of the prototype Deadman, and especially with her abilities with extreme tissue regeneration, and how they basically just cut her up over and over again to see how fast she could heal herself, and how that basically created the personality monster that she has, the alternate personality that is the monster that she has. Again, I think Deadman Wonderland is a very good series for kind of what it does with characters. And let's see, 7 Deadly Sins, Volume 10, which again features a neat backstory for King, and kind of King's relationship with Diane, or Diani, however they're pronouncing it. I probably should watch the anime, but Netflix is only gonna do a sub version of it, which, I mean, come on, Netflix, you're rolling in the bank here. You really can't afford a dub for yourself, but again, nitpicking. But that was a pretty neat volume with kind of King, and also his kind of lax relationship with another old friend of his that he knew back in the Fairy Kingdom, and how all that is relating to how things are now. and especially with what's his name, um, the what's his name, the immortal dude. I forget his name. Um, and his final face off with or yeah, Bond and his and sort of what they're telling him to do, to have to go and kill Meliodas, which can anyone even kill that guy? He's so OP. That's kind of the weird thing about Seven Deadly Sins is really, like, basically all the main characters of Seven Deadly Sins have already started at this ungodly OP level, and it's all the villains that are actually building up to be a legitimate threat to the Seven Deadly Sins now, with their escalating powers and abilities. It's kind of a neat reversal for a shonen series like that. Let's see. Case Closed, Volume 56, which focused on kind of two little mysteries. One is a locked room murder involving a mystery novel writer, and especially how even the mystery novel writer committed the crime. And kind of, one of those neat little ideas that you see where a mystery novel writer is trying to write mysteries, and then he's actually committing the murders, or even almost committing the murders, to see if they would actually work that way. And of course, the mystery in here, the locked room murder, actually kind of went through. So they're instead trying to figure out how he did it. And then the next murder mystery in here that actually focuses on it's hard to remember some of these little mysteries. Specifically, them trying to still track down the mysterious Men in Black, and oh yeah, it's mostly a guy who gets murdered in his apartment building. I know you can't really see that. He gets murdered in his apartment building, and Jimmy and the gang show up to try and investigate it, to see how he was killed, and it somehow involves plastic model kits. Assassination Classroom, Volume 6, where we find out, in fact, that there is a surefire way to disable Kuro Sensei, and even possibly actually get him slow enough that you could actually kill him with one of the anti-Kuro Sensei weapons. And in fact, the sort of prototype, genetically created brother person to Kuro actually almost takes him out. But again, that was the first portion. The rest of the volume, and probably what's gonna cover the next volume, is specifically the kids all finding out that midterm, I think, like, the first semester exams are coming up, which means that they're gonna get the actual real kind of exam testing, that to see Kuro Sensei as an actual teacher and what he's taught the kids. Specifically, Kuro Sensei's big motivation being that for every kid that gets like a number one spot in their respective academias, like whichever kid in their classroom, for every kid in the classroom that scores number one in, like, math, English, science, all of those other subjects, Kuro Sensei will actually lop off one of his main tentacle feet, which he explains that every tentacle feet that he loses, his speed actually drops by about, I think he said 20%. So so now the kids have a serious incentive to actually do well in their studies, because if Kuro Sensei loses even like 4 or 5 tentacles, he could become so slow that they could actually kill him. So that's going to be interesting to see, especially that it's only volume 6 and they're already at one of the first one of the one of the first semester exams. And again, they explain in the first volume that Kuro Sensei is only going to be a teacher for a whole year. So they're essentially saying that uh, this is volume 6. It's already been about, I'd say, 4 or 5 months. So we only got 7 more months to go for the rest of the series. So it'll be interesting to see if he keeps at this pace and we only wind up with about maybe 15 or 20 volumes, or if they're gonna throw in some other plot point that's gonna somehow extend the length of the series for even more. Then next up, Dance in the Vampire Bund, The Scarlet Order 2, Dance in the Vampire Bund 2, The Scarlet Order Volume 3. This volume focuses a lot more on Mina, and actually the Mina's twin sister, who was the main villain, revealed to be the main villain from the main series, and how all of this ties into the Akamitama, which is the sort of relic that is supposed to allow vampires to not have to feast on blood, and also basically have like all kinds of other uber enhancements to their powers, but has the side effect of actually weakening Mina as a vampire. It's, again, a pretty interesting series, especially kind of where it's going as far as the character relationships and stuff. I heard that, I've already looked it up, that next volume is going to be the last volume, so we'll see if that becomes the final volume, or if this spins into yet another continuation of the Dance of the Vampire Bund saga. Then next up, Knights of Sidonia, Volume 14, which features again more of the the anti-human scientist Ochihai's formation into a hybrid Ghana creature, and then also meanwhile Tanikaze's very varying romances, and kind of how all that's tying together to them launching a final strike against the Ghana. So far, I heard that next volume is going to be the last volume of Knights of Sidonia. So I'm going to be interested to see how the series actually wraps up. And, the whole series was just kind of a blur for me. I'm going to have to probably try and reread the whole thing to really get a solid basis on kind of how I feel about the series and how it really plays out. Then less heavy than others is a neat little kind of gem from those 1990s Viz graphic novels that didn't really take off. This is Eat Man Volume 1, Eat Man Volume 2 Second Course. These are the only 2 volumes of Eat Man that were ever published in America, or published in English, I believe. And it tells the story of an explorer named Bolt Crank, and he's a explorer. I said that. But explorer doesn't really necessarily mean that he goes and finds new land or territories or anything. It mostly means that you give him money, he does the job, whatever the job is. But the unique thing about him, though, is that whatever he eats, he can like mold it into his hand. Like if he eats a gun, the gun can form in his hand at any time. But again, he has to eat every single piece of the gun. And also, he can't just form bullets. He also has to eat the bullets to form into the gun. So there's some limitations to it. Like, if he wants to form like some kind of big weapon or something, he has to probably dismantle it and eat each individual part to form it into his body, which is why throughout the series, you'll routinely see him eating like nuts and bolts, just kind of chewing on them, because, he's got to eat every single bolt or it won't work. And there's some interesting little stories in here. There's no really ongoing plot to say, so you're not really out of anything to get both volumes and read them. They all read as little standalone sci-fi apocalyptic tales. There's something going on. Bull Crank is involved, and he saves the day, or he intervenes in some way and makes things work out. So it's a fun little read if you're looking for something more offbeat and weird in your apocalyptic sci-fi stories. Then next up, another neat little gem here that from Comics 1, which was a fairly kind of short-lived manga line that actually put out a lot of neat series. This is Red Prowling Devil, which I got volumes 1 through 3 here. This is all I've read so far, with 8 volumes total that should be coming sometime. This is a series of following Naomi O'Brien, who is an ace jet pilot who was formerly involved with the IRA, and then following a terrorist bombing incident or planned terrorist attack, she was found and committed to a life sentence, but was then taken out of prison and conscripted to work with a secret mercenary group as their ace fighter pilot for whatever jobs they need her to do. And for every successful mission, they get to sort of knock time off of her sentencing. And they also, I guess, give her a fair amount of pay too. But it's a pretty interesting series to read. I definitely like a lot of the aerial combat that's in here. There's also some interesting character development between Naomi and her mechanic and her handler and her the main boss guy who kind of orders her on missions. And even some of the bad guys get some interesting development. You find out there's an actual rival group, kind of like a Spectre to James Bond's MI6, that's also doing their own business work. And also the plane designs are spec accurate. So if you're a big fan of kind of those military fiction, focusing heavily on the realism and a lot of neat kind of aerial combat, this is definitely a cool series for you. The only downside I would say is the first volume. They really blaze through a lot of plot really fast. Like, they set everything up like in the first couple chapters, and it's like bam bam bam. You're just kind of wondering, like, do people really talk in this kind of weird exposition dump? But that's kind of the way things are in manga. You gotta lay it out fast, because you don't wanna kind of draw things out and then find out that the series got canceled before you could even get anything going. So it's kind of that's kind of a nitpick that's really more of a product of the industry that it was published in. But the rest of the volumes, they slow things down, and you get some neat, natural following kind of progression in the plot. Then next up, see, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Battle Tendencies Volume 1. Again, this is a kind of a misleading number, volume numbering, because again, this should be JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Volume 6 and 7, as it was originally published. But of course, we want to break it up for those fans that choose not to. Maybe there's some people that don't really care for Phantom Blood. I don't know. Uh, but in any case, this is what we got. It's a pretty neat series so far. I've read all of JoJo up to like I think halfway through part 6, Stone Ocean, and then I also read like I think 4 or 5 volumes of part 7, Steamball Run, not Steel Ball Run. So I'm pretty familiar with all of the major arcs of JoJo that a lot of people have read. Um, it's interesting because the first time I read this series back in college, like 8 or 10 years ago, uh, I really liked Phantom Blood a lot more than Battle Tendencies. I didn't think Battle Tendencies was a really worth what people praise it for. But rereading it here, uh, I'm turned around. I really absolutely like part 2 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It really kind of just dives into it. There's a whole lot of cool, weird stuff going on in here. Especially when I reread Phantom Blood, and I was really kind of disappointed in how the first 2 volumes of that that were basically, this is 2 volumes apiece. The whole first volume of Phantom Blood, it was basically like just all set up. There was no weird vampire stuff at all. Like, it was just so slow. And of course, if you're trying to like pitch it to somebody like, here, read this, and they're reading like the first volume, and they're like, really, come on, we got like 2 guys that are just dicks to each other, and that's your story. I'm like, no, 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 there's vampires and weird kung fu later. And they're going like, yeah, well, where's the weird kung fu vampire action in this tale that seemed to be like a mixture between pro wrestling and a Jane Austen book club read. And it's just like, well, okay, he had to kind of build up and get to there. But here, it's straight out of the gate, ready to roll, crazy action. And again, people that love JoJo, that maybe like kind of those earlier JoJo, the pre-stand stuff, this Battle Tendencies is definitely much better for that than the first Phantom Blood arc. Phantom Blood arc is like if the first part of that with the setup and stuff before he meets Zeppeli, if that could have just been shortened or something, like, I would have loved it a lot more. But in any case, again, as always, great hardcover presentation. Even spliced in here a lot of nice extra detail work with some of the reproduced red, black ink colorings. Really love it a lot. Definitely worth picking up. It'll be interesting to see if after Battle Tendencies is done, and they've already reprinted all of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 3 with the new Stardust Crusaders tag subtitling, indicating it's the third part. If they can start producing Part 4 and on for JoJo, my mind will be blown. That's the real key, because that's the part where you get all the weird stand battles that just get even weirder. And again, the main issue that a lot of fans are going to have to come to grips with is the fact that they're probably going to have to completely rename all of the stands, because they're all named after rock bands, and you can't get away with that for copyright reasons here in the States. Foo Fighters finds out you named something after them, and they're going to want a paycheck. Bad Company finds out that somebody named something after them, they're going to want a paycheck. These manga companies aren't made of money. I'll tell you that right now. In stateside, so that'll be something to see. And then finally, the last part of this update, Shiguru Mizuki's Hitler. Now, of course, I'm bringing this up now, Sunday, 3 days ago. Shiguru Mizuki passed away. He fell down in his home, and he had some sort of a head trauma, and sometime later he died of heart failure in the hospital. And he was 93 years old, and he's a legend. He's an absolute god in his craft. He's probably one of the last of the old guard for manga, hit in the great pantheon of manga creators, right up there with Yoshihiro Tatsumi and Osamu Tezuka and all the others. It's just a shame that his stuff only started getting really pushed to get translated over here just 3 years ago with Onward Towards Our Noble Death. It was that, and then they started printing out Nanamba, the Showa History of Japan series, which won an Eisner, and deservedly so. And then the biographical story of Hitler, and then also starting next year, they're gonna be producing translations for the rest of the Kitaro stories, through Drawn and Quarterly, which that's really great to hear. He's it's kind of a somber note to find out that you just started really getting into the work of a particular creator, and then you find out that his time is over, and now everything I'm gonna read from him is gonna be in a different kind of light, but moving aside, about the story itself, Hitler. This is again a fairly well researched biographical depiction of Adolf Hitler, starting more or less as early as a lot of historians can care to begin with, talking about Hitler, which is more or less pre-World War One, specifically during Hitler's time as a sort of vagrant. He was raised a small poor man in Germany, and 1908 is where our story begins. So Hitler was more or less in his 20s at the beginning of this story, and he starts as a painter, and he's eventually, painting doesn't really work out for him as a stable career choice, and he's eventually drafted into the military for duty during World War One, and it's during his time in service and for Germany that they sort of explain that he had a bit of a strong patriotism for Germany beforehand, but then following his time serving in World War One, that he starts to really become extremely patriotic, very, very determined to sort of recapture the lost glory of Germany, following how Germany was sort of treated following the events of World War One. A lot of historians will say that World War Two happened primarily because of the way things fell and the way the cards fell following World War One. The Treaty of Versailles was more or less drawn up to lay all the blame on Germany, and it crippled that country, and as a result it created this environment where something like Adolf Hitler, who was going to tell the people that he was going to take care of everything and was going to make everything the way it was and even make things better. And the people who have been stripped of everything, all their pride in their country and everything, they of course gravitate towards that. And you also get to see more of it. It focuses a lot less on the military aspect of Hitler's involvement in World War II, and again, more on his personal life. The death of his niece, Janelle. I have a hard time figuring out how her name is actually pronounced. Angela Gili Raubal, who was again Hitler's niece, and her committing suicide, and how that had a very strong effect on Hitler following the rest of his career as the Führer of Germany, and then also his eventual relationship with Eva Braun, and his relationship with Benito Mussolini, and basically his politicking with Joseph Stalin, and even just before he became Führer, his relationship and his involvement with the then current ruler of Germany. I think they still had a prime minister then, or something similar to that. You really get inside the head of Adolf Hitler, and you really kind of see things from his perspective. It's a really interesting kind of tale. It's something that only Shiguru Mizuki could have put together. Again, they have a very well done foreword by Frederick Skod, who sort of explains how a lot of stuff about World War II isn't really brought up in Japan, except when it's in reference to the Pacific War, because again, Japan didn't really have that big of a role or that big of a historical significance on a lot of the Eurocentric parts of World War II. But in any case, again, if you're already a big Shigeru Mizuki fan, or if you're just a general fan of World War II and Hitler, in a speculative sense, I guess, it's definitely worth picking up. It feels very well researched. He pulls a lot of details and a lot of ideas and speculation that's all grounded in sort of a realistic sense. He's not like adding a whole bunch of weird stuff like say Hitler had, like saying, oh, Hitler had some kind of obsession with like I don't know, poker or something. Anything that's brought up or that's kind of established in Hitler's character is things that can be directly referenced by say, an interview or something that Hitler wrote at some point that would lead you to believe that about him. So that's all I got for the November manga update. Check you again for December, where I'll be bringing back my my sort of annual awards for a lot of mangas that I think deserve recognition that I've read for all of this year. Later.